Groupthink is probably the biggest problem I hear leaders complain about. It's the barrier to innovation. It leads to all kinds of bad decisions. It gets in the way of change.
So the first idea here is that when we have strong ideological commitments, and everyone around us does, and you can think of what happens when you're voting, you're a Democrat or a Republican or something else altogether, there's a lot of head nodding, a lot of agreement, and a lot of people just sort of figuring out, is this person one of us? Are they not one of us? And that's not really the environment that you want if you're trying to seek the truth, right? Especially given the fact that many people can be wrong about certain things. Instead, you want an adversarial environment, right? You want an environment that's more like a courtroom where people are encouraged to publicly disagree with each other.
To say, while yes, there is wisdom in the crowds, when you add social influence to the mix and people talk to each other and adjust their opinions, it can actually undermine our collective intelligence and lead to a process of groupthink. So our work shows that that's actually not right. It turns out it's all about the social networks. We conducted a social experiment on the internet in which we recruited 1,300 people from their World Wide Web and put them into social networks where they could influence one another. And we found that social influence helped the crowd to make significantly better decisions than they made when they were independent. We asked participants questions like, how many calories are in this meal? How much is the cost of these consumer items? How many jelly beans are in the jar? So to start, we created a control group in which individuals answered these questions independently. We gave them 2 chances to revise their answers, and what we found was, over the course of their revisions, their answers didn't get any more accurate. Then we ran the study and brought in social influence. This time, after the participants made their initial guesses, we let them see the average estimate made by their peers in a sort of egalitarian or decentralized social network, and then gave them the opportunity to revise their answer again. We did this process one more time. And in this decentralized network, everyone's opinion carried the same weight. We found that these groups became considerably more accurate, showing that social influence, as long as it's distributed equally in a network, makes for a much smarter crowd. So we repeated the experiment, but this time we chose some people at random to be opinion leaders or central nodes in the network, and we shared only their guesses with the rest of the participants. These opinion leaders acted like centers of gravity in the social network, pulling the group toward them. If our randomly chosen opinion leaders were more correct, the group as a whole got more accurate. However, if the opinion leader was less accurate, the entire group got less accurate. And this is important because even if opinion leaders were more accurate on some topics, they were consistently less accurate on other topics. And so as a result, on average, opinion leaders were more likely than not to lead the group astray.
This is only the beginning, but we already have some insights. Good collective decisions require 2 components: deliberation and diversity of opinions. Right now, the way we typically make our voice heard in many societies is through direct or indirect voting. This is good for diversity of opinions, and it has the great virtue of ensuring that everyone gets to express their voice. But it's not so good to foster thoughtful debates. Our experiments suggest a different method that may be effective in balancing these 2 goals at the same time, by forming small groups that converge to a single decision while still maintaining diversity of opinions, because there are many independent groups.
So the social media content algorithms, right, they decide what you read and what you watch. And they do that for literally billions of people for hours every day, right? So in that sense, they have more control over human cognitive input than any dictator in history has ever had. More than Stalin, more than Kim Il-sung, more than Hitler, right? They have massive power over human beings.
Now, if algorithms can influence human behavior, how might someone actually influence an algorithm? Computer scientists often focus on direct influence, right? The software engineers who create it, the data standard creators who define what it's able to know, the training data sets that sometimes steer its early actions. But adaptive algorithms are also designed to be indirectly influenced. Their function is to observe human behavior and react accordingly. So influencing adaptive algorithms in some sense isn't hard. They're designed for that purpose. But what's hard is systematically influencing them and predicting what will happen.
If you're more extreme, you have a higher emotional response to content that affirms your current views of the world. And so what in politics we call it red meat, right? The kind of content that gets the base riled up about, whatever it is they're riled up about, whether it's the environment or immigrants flooding our shores or whatever it might be, right? Once you get the sense that someone might be a little bit upset about too many immigrants, then you send them stuff about all the bad things that immigrants do, and videos of people climbing over walls and sneaking into beaches and all the rest of the stuff. Human propagandists have known this forever, but historically, human propagandists could only produce one message, whereas the content algorithms can produce, in theory, one propaganda stream for each human being, specially tailored to them, and the algorithm knows how you engage with every single piece of content, right? Your typical, Hitler's propagandist sitting in Berlin had absolutely no idea on a moment-to-moment basis how people were reacting.
People sometimes think of, people sometimes bring a deterministic viewpoint to the ethics of considering these technologies, right? If the concern is that if you introduce the technology, then it will unleash new kinds of hatred or harm, then you might have really good reason to hold back and do as much as you can to predict and prevent problems. But also sometimes there are certain problems that only occur when the ingredients fit together, right? That in context, the system gets used by a certain set of actors.
One of the most shocking pieces of information that I brought out of Facebook that I think is essential to this disclosure is political parties have been quoted in Facebook's own research saying, we know you changed how you pick out the content that goes in the home feed. And now, if we don't publish angry, hateful, polarizing, divisive content, crickets. We don't get anything. And we don't like this. We even know our constituents don't like this. But if we don't do these stories, we don't get distributed. And so it used to be that we did very little of it. And now we have to do a lot of it because we have jobs to do. And if we don't get traffic and engagement, we'll lose our jobs.
The longer they can keep you in there, the better, and the more engaged. And it comes with a lot of pitfalls, because if I'm very angry and I say, I hate this thing I'm seeing, it's still engagement. I'm still writing comments and clicking and spending my time there. And that's what we end up having a lot. Content that makes people very engaged, whether it's for good or bad.
It just becomes a definitional issue. So what people will say is, oh, we disagree on the specifics of regulation. We don't want it to be overbroad. But in reality, people are afraid of crossing powerful interest groups, business groups, technology lobbyists.
In an article that you wrote for Wired about YouTube's feedback loop, you stated that you could have predicted that the AI would deliberately promote harmful videos behind some of the conspiracies that we've seen recently. How could you have known that ahead of time, and was it flagged?
So you can't detect everything ahead of time. The idea is to try to detect as soon as possible. So you can predict that there is going to be toxic feedback loops. How can you see where the feedback loops are taking place? And for that, you need the number of recommendations that a video is promoted. So if you see that a video is particularly being promoted by YouTube and it's toxic, then you know it's going to create a feedback loop.
And do you think just the executives had the best interest at heart? So people promoting things like fake news and conspiracy theories just wasn't thought of. You thought people would just genuinely post truthful videos in community with one another.
So they were really focusing on how to gain market share, be like 20-30% more efficient every year. There's few millions people who were going to conspiracy videos because of YouTube recommendations. It was not a big deal for them.
Because the business model is to keep people engaged, which in other words, this hearing is about persuasive technology. And persuasion is about an invisible asymmetry of power. When I was a kid, I was a magician. And magic teaches you that you can have asymmetric power without the other person realizing it. You can masquerade to have asymmetric power while looking like you have an equal relationship. You say, pick a card, any card, while meanwhile you know exactly how to get that person to pick the card that you want. And essentially what we're experiencing with technology is an increasing asymmetry of power that's been masquerading itself as an equal or contractual relationship where the responsibility is on us. So let's walk through why that's happening. In the race for attention, because there's only so much attention, companies have to get more of it by being more and more aggressive. I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh. So you pull to refresh your newsfeed. That operates like a slot machine. It has the same kind of addictive qualities that keep people in Las Vegas hooked to the slot machine. Other examples are removing stopping cues. So if I take the bottom out of this glass and I keep refilling the water or the wine, you won't know when to stop drinking. So that's what happens with infinitely scrolling feeds. We naturally remove the stopping cues, and this is what keeps people scrolling. But the race for attention has to get more and more aggressive. And so it's not enough just to get your behavior and predict what will take your behavior. We have to predict how to keep you hooked in a different way. And so it crawled deeper down the brainstem into our social validation. So that was the introduction of likes and followers. How many followers do I have? And that got it was much cheaper to, instead of getting your attention, to get you addicted to getting attention from other people. And this has created the kind of mass narcissism and mass cultural thing that's happening with young people, especially today. And after 2 decades in decline, the mental health of 10 to 14-year-old girls has actually shot up 170% in the last 8 years. And this has been very characteristically the cause of social media. And in the race for attention, it's not enough just to get people addicted to attention. The race has to migrate to AI. Who can build a better predictive model of your behavior? And so if you give an example of YouTube, so there you are, you're about to hit play on a YouTube video, and you hit play, and then you think you're going to watch this one video, and then you wake up 2 hours later and say, oh my God, what just happened? And the answer is because you had a supercomputer pointed at your brain. And in the moment you hit play, it wakes up an avatar voodoo doll-like version of you inside of a Google server. And that avatar, based on all the clicks and likes and everything you've ever made, those are like your hair clippings and toenail clippings and nail filings that make the avatar look and act more and more like you. So that inside of a Google server, they can simulate more and more possibilities. If I prick you with this video, if I prick you with this video, how long would you stay? And the business model is simply what maximizes watch time.